Welcome to Monday afternoon. I'm Faye Waterman, and this is A Conversation with Faye. And my guest today is Kathy Kaplan. Now, Kathy is the founder and president of Impact, Independent Organisation Management Professionals. In 2011, Kathy was awarded an Order of Australia Medal for her work in the area of domestic violence. She's also been honoured with the prestige of the Ron Caston Humanitarian Award for Lifetime Achievements. Kathy is the daughter of a Holocaust survivor. She is a self-professed learning junkie who must have drunk the spirit of volunteerism with her mother's milk, she says. Originally a secondary maths English teacher who spent most of her teaching career in North Queensland, working with Aboriginals and Islander adolescents. She has spent the better part of her professional life working in the fields of educational management and fundraising. She now runs a charity as a volunteer to make a difference to Victorian women and children fleeing extreme violence in Victoria. She's a 6-time breast cancer survivor. Kathy has been a passionate presenter, advocate for breast cancer research and specialised in supporting young single mums facing their breast cancer journey. She has the sad privilege of sitting with several such women during their last hours and minutes. I would like to welcome Kathy to the studio, and let's hear what Kathy has to say. My guest today is Kathy Kaplan. Welcome to the microphone, Kathy, and thank you for your time.
Good morning, Faye. Lovely to see you again.
It is wonderful to catch up with you. I've been wanting to catch up with you for a long time because I think the work that you actually do, and particularly right now, is vital for a lot of people out there. Now, Kathy, I usually start with a question like, was there anyone who inspired you when you were growing up?
Oh my goodness, yes. My mother and my grandmother, we come from a line of very strong women, and my grandparents in particular. There's a story, my mother is a Holocaust survivor.
Right.
And there's a story before she was arrested, the family was arrested when she was 13 by the Nazis. Where they lived, it was a little village called Žilina, which is in the northeast of Slovakia, 20 minutes away from Auschwitz. And that was actually the last transit stop before Auschwitz. And my grandfather got together a whole stack of friends. They bribed the Red Cross for their armbands. They took off their yellow stars, put on the armbands, and went to the transit station to clear the trucks of their shit buckets and to give them fresh water for the last leg of their lives. And I think about that often, and I think about, golly, if they can do that, then what I'm doing is nothing, and we all have an obligation to do something.
Yeah, and what was the strength of your mother? You know, what was the inspiration that she actually gave you? Obviously, a lot of it came from her mother and the experiences that she actually had. But what was it that she passed on to you or inspired you to be the person you are today?
Well, what inspires me is something she taught me from a very early age, where in our tradition we're taught, pray to God as if everything is up to God, but act as if everything is up to you. And it's that action, that requirement to do, that requirement to help. And everybody can. It can be just giving a smile to a stranger down the street. That can make their day, make their week. It can be as simple as that. But everybody has an obligation to make somebody else's life better.
Isn't it interesting? Because if you go for a walk and you smile at someone and they smile back at you, you've made their day, because they may never get someone to smile at them or even recognise that they exist. So, you know, it's really interesting it's such a little gesture, but with such great meaning and emotion.
Absolutely, yes.
And what else did she do? What else did she teach?
Everything I know from Mum. She's such a strong, well, until recently, she's such a strong woman. She's still alive, but dementia has attacked her really viciously.
Sad.
Really viciously. Still, her essence is there. So, optimism. Things can get better. Things will get better. Yes, there might be worse days, but over time, things will be better. And what can you do to do that? What mindset can you put yourself in? And the other thing, and she will be quite horrified because my lipstick today is clearly not bright enough, a little bit of lipstick won't hurt.
Isn't that fabulous? I love that. Because, they grew up in a time where you took pride in yourself, and lipstick, and I wear red lipstick all the time, but lipstick is something that makes you feel good. You put it on and you feel dressed. It's a bit like having your hair done, isn't it?
Well, when I looked in the mirror this morning, my lipstick looked okay, but I can see through the camera that it's actually looks non-existent. So, Mum, I am wearing it.
Talk about, when you were growing up and when you went to school, were there any teachers that actually inspired you?
Yes, Mrs. Norris inspired me. It's interesting, my 5 best friends, we all met on the first day at school at Macrob. So it was the 4th of February 1970, I can specify that. And every quarter we still meet for dinner for whoever is in the state of Victoria.
Wow.
So we've been doing that for a lot of years now. And we differ about who was the inspiring teacher for us.
Right.
So for me, it was Mrs. Norris, and she taught me maths and German.
Right.
She was a young woman. I found her inspirational. I found her caring. I found her personable. I understood the way she taught. And she was that for me. She wasn't that for all of my girlfriends. One of my girlfriends, I'm not going to mention the teacher's name, was inspiring for her. But for me, I liked her. But at the end of year 12, or Form 6 as it was then, she said to me, "Kathy, you're a sweet girl, but you'll amount to nothing." 10 years later, we had a reunion, and she came up to me and said, "Kathy, and she was my maths teacher, "Kathy, what did you end up doing?" And I said, "Mrs. I became a really first-class maths teacher."
Isn't that fabulous? And
so actually, I think so. In a way, she inspired me, not by what she said, because that was cruel.
Yes,
but by her teaching style, which did not suit me. I learnt ways of teaching that would be more relatable to more children.
Yes, and isn't that interesting? Because what we learn in school, some of it we can take on and be better teachers, because you have an understanding of what they didn't teach. Well, they didn't teach you the way that you needed to learn, and we all learn in different ways. Yeah. And so therefore those that are struggling need to be taught in a different way. And I know that the school system hasn't the ability or the time to be able to do that. But then, as a teacher, you can become creative, and you
to be creative,
and to pick the children that are struggling and think of ways to inspire them to want to learn, because they don't want to learn because it's too hard for them and they're struggling. So being that...
I don't think it's so much that it's too hard. It's not being presented in a way that's relevant to them.
Yeah.
I think that's, So and this COVID time has been really interesting with all the distance learning.
Yes.
So many teachers have really stepped up to the mark and have been creative and done wonderful things. One of my daughter-in-laws, for example, is a VCE drama teacher. Now, that's a challenge to teach drama remotely, but she's done an amazing job. And some teachers, because teachers are human, have found it really difficult, and what they've delivered to their students is really the same as what they would have in a classroom, but via the internet, which has not worked.
Yes. All about being creative. It's all about using that imagination and connection, making that connection, isn't it?
Exactly.
To bring them to want to be in the class remotely, to want to know what's coming next. So creating that excitement and creating that desire to want to learn. And that's a difficult thing. And particularly, when you're not used to teaching remotely and you teach in a classroom. And I mean, some of the kids struggled and teachers struggled, but some really blossomed.
But if you look at it broadly, in a classroom, in a normal classroom, some teachers struggled as well, some students struggled. So it's the same struggle, it's just through a different medium.
Yes.
And keeping children engaged, that's a perennial problem. It was a problem 3,000 years ago, it's a problem now. But all of our attention spans are shorter and shorter now.
Yes.
So that's an increased challenge for teachers.
Why is our attention span shorter and shorter? Is it because we have so many objects and so many shiny things to distract us? Oh, I'll go on that for a little while. Oh, no, I see this is better, etc. So the distractions are far greater now than what they were when you and I went to school.
But also, as well as that, we get information in a lot of information in very small chunks. So we can absorb a lot in a very short period of time.
Whereas now there's so much information out there, just the press of a button, and it's overwhelming, really, when you really think about it. It is overwhelming. Okay, so I'm quite fascinated that the first day of school and you still have your girlfriends. That is, that is a treasure. That is beautiful.
It's an absolute treasure. Many of the girls I went to Macrob, it was a girls' school, still is a girls' school, and so many of the girls came with people they knew. We were 5 girls who didn't know anybody. We were the only children from our school. So we connected and we stayed connected.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think that's a treasure to have.
It absolutely is. I value it, and we know we're there for each other if we need in between, but often we don't need to between the quarterly, and we take up the conversation where we left off. And occasionally some of them bring their husbands along, but it doesn't work. And they just sit there, what are you guys talking about?
Yes.
But I'm sometimes saying that too. Sometimes they're remembering an incident and I'm looking, where was I?
Yeah.
How come I didn't know about that naughty person or that naughty thing? Or why didn't you include me?
It's interesting, isn't it? So when you left school, what form of study did you take up? You said you were a teacher. Was it an intentional thing to become a teacher? Were you inspired by the teachers at school, and the one in particular that said that you don't make much of yourself?
My answer is yes and no. There was a fraction of a minute that the answer was no. I grew up always wanting to teach. I loved school.
Right.
I'm a learning junkie and it suited me down to the ground. Sometimes I was very unhappy at school, but I loved school. So I was going to be a teacher always, and that was my ideal. And at the time there was something called the Commonwealth Scholarships, where you could be bonded to the education department if you became a teacher.
Right.
I was offered that scholarship. And that was the 5 minutes that I wasn't 100% sure if I was committed enough to be bonded for 5 years to go into the country.
Oh, so
I declined the scholarship.
Right.
But thank you, Mr. Gough Whitlam. Yes, I could go to university anyway. Had he not made university free at the time, yes, or even this current situation with HECS and you can pay back later on,
yeah,
I wouldn't, at that time it was pay up front. And there's no way my mother, as a single mum with 2 children, could possibly have ever dreamt of doing that. So yes, I went to Monash, the real Monash. It was the only Monash then. It was Clayton. Yeah. Young people, when they say they're going to Monash, and I say, which one, the real one? They look at me as if I'm an idiot. But, that's my personal in-joke with myself.
Don't understand, do they?
Yeah, I did an arts degree. I was in the first honours class of linguistics at Monash, so I did an honours degree, then did dip ed.
Right. Linguistics, what languages do you...
It's actually not the study of languages, it's the study of language. So I actually did French and German at school, and I did Spanish and German at uni, but linguistics is the scientific study of language. My honours thesis, I replicated a PhD where somebody was studying the concept of how young children understand time: before, after, in front of, behind, spatial time, conceptual time. So I replicated that with 5-year-old Italian English-speaking children and just English-speaking children. I had 3 times the number of subjects that the PhD study had, and I got slammed for not having enough subjects in my study. I mean, I got a great grade anyway, but that was the criticism. My 60 children weren't enough when the PhD person had done 20.
Oh, really? And so what was the outcome of that? You're saying that children have this perception, young children have this perception of time. I think we as adults struggle with that perception of time and the reality of time, because we all have the same amount of time.
Exactly, but I was looking at, oh golly, you're asking me to remember something 40 years ago. Or more. It was like, put this block behind that block after you do this. That sort of thing.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, put the red block behind the blue block after you move the yellow block away. So we were doing physical things, because you can't talk conceptually with a 4 or 5-year-old. So I could do it with concrete objects.
And they'd relate very quickly to it, wouldn't they?
They did, and I don't recall well enough right now on the spot. I could pull it out and check, but what the results were. But it was quite interesting, and validated the PhD study.
Isn't it interesting? I mean, the person that graded your PhD would have a different perception to what you had in the research and everything that you did too.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting. We all have different perceptions of things. But when you were teaching, you went into teaching.
Yes.
And you taught maths.
I taught maths. I did my final teaching round at Corowa Church of England Girls Grammar School in Glen Iris.
Right, okay.
And the principal there was Miss McPherson, and she always wore an academic gown. I'm sure she's showered in it. I never once saw her out of her academic gown.
Really?
Yeah. And she ran the school in a way that really suited the sort of person I was, and probably still am in my core, but nobody could run a school that way now. She ran it with a real iron rod. But the upshot of that was, as staff, we knew exactly what was required of us, when it was required, and how it was required. And that suited me down to the ground, because then I knew, okay, I've met the requirement, now I'm giving of myself.
Yes. And
that's been a challenge for me since then, because nobody's ever been that clear, which means I have to imagine what their baseline is.
Yeah.
And because I'm not sure, I have to shoot higher. And because I'm not sure that's enough, I've got to shoot higher again. And that's actually not sustainable or healthy, but it was really good for me. So in my final teaching round, there was a little note on my desk one day, and it said, Miss McPherson would like to see you in her study. So I quivered and quaked and went in. I was married already, so I had my married surname. And she said, Mrs. Krieger, we're quite impressed with you. Would you like a job with us next year? And I said, yes, please. And she said, would you like to think about it? And I said, no, thank you.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
That's funny.
So I taught there for a couple of years, and then, as I said, I was married at the time, and my husband became a pilot, and he then was travelling around Australia getting jobs anywhere, and usually in the outback in Western Australia. And there were no mobile phones, of course, or internet or anything, and there was only one phone booth where he was living in Derby at the time, and it only worked sometimes. And so one of the conversations I had with him was that if he gets a job in the eastern states, I'll go. So another phone call came and he said, I've got an opportunity of a job in Townsville or in Longreach.
Right.
Now, I have to tell you, in 1980, who knew where Townsville or Longreach were? Nobody. So I looked it up on an atlas, and the next time he rang, I said, darling, news doesn't travel to Derby very well. Longreach is not in the eastern states anymore. And so we ended up in Townsville, and from Townsville, Cairns, and I taught up there with Aboriginal and Islander children, and it was a wonderful experience.
What was the experience teaching? You know, the culture is different. A beautiful culture in its own way, isn't it? And to be respected, because, you know, we look at hundreds of years ago, they had a sustainable life. They, you know, they did things and they survived and they were resourceful and all that. Today we're not very resourceful and we're very wasteful. We're a disposable race, I suppose you could say. We couldn't go out into the bush and survive like they did. You know, so what did you learn from them? What was it that really sticks out in your mind about when you were teaching them and how they behaved? And
Kindness. Remember, early 80s, all of Australia was, but far north Queensland more, and far north Queensland even more, very prejudicial, very discriminatory, very racist. The white population treated the Indigenous population abysmally, but that was the time. The children that I worked with, they're all secondary age children, incredibly kind. It was the first time I'd met anybody who came from families of 13, 14, 15 children.
Wow. Oh.
One of the schools I taught in was a boarding school, and you know, and all of those girls were, and you know, what I ended up having to teach them were things that I'd never thought as a maths teacher I'd have to teach. You know, there was a social dance one night, and one of my students was outside crying, and I went to her and said, "What's wrong?" She said, "Oh, miss, I'm going to have a baby." And I said, "What do you mean you're going to have a baby?" And she said, "I sat on that chair." I said, "What do you mean you sat on that chair?" And she said, "My sister sat on that chair and she had a baby and I sat on it, now I'm going to have a baby."
Oh, wow.
So, you know, teaching things like that, I threw away the curriculum. I was given a huge privilege of looking after a group of, they were all Islander girls who were about to turn 15 and so leave school, but they were all functionally illiterate and innumerate.
Wow.
So I basically threw away the whole curriculum and we did practical things. We went to the bank and we got withdrawal and deposit slips. Who knows how to do it now? But then you had to know how to do it, and we were practicing that. We looked through recipe books. What are we going to make? Okay, what do we have to buy? How much do we have to buy? Let's go shopping. We'd go back to my house and we'd cook it and then take it back to school to share. So real life practical skills we ended up doing. So it was an amazing year. There was a very scary time too.
Right.
That school, another school, was not a boarding school, and the young man's name was Vern. He was really a big man. He was 15, but he was huge. And he was a very clever boy. He was the youngest of 15, and every sibling was in jail.
Except for him, so far.
So he saw no future. That was his future.
Right.
As far as people. Yeah, but he was a really kind, gentle giant. But one day he was being really naughty and I said to him, Vern, sit down. And he said, why do I have to sit down, miss? And I said, because I need to yell at you and I can't yell at your tummy button. Sit down. So we did that. Oh, actually, that's right. That was when I was pregnant. And he sat down and he was looking at me and baby was moving in me and he said, miss, your tummy's moving. I said, I know, look at my eyes. But miss, your tummy's moving. Can I touch? No, look at my eyes.
Oh, wow.
But there was a story of, and this shows the family bonds, maybe not in a particularly healthy way, but you can view it in a healthy way. Yeah. Well, I choose to anyway. I was on bus duty one Friday night and I had to walk down the back paddock and I saw Vern and another guy having fisticuffs. Mm-hmm. I was 21, 22 maybe. Wow. What did I know? I walked up to them and said, I'll have that, thank you. And suddenly a knife is being wielded at me. I thought it was a real joke until Mum arrived at the police station and she was, I'm told, chasing them around the table in the police station. So just before lunch, Vern barges into my classroom and says, Miss, me mum says I've got to apologise. I said, okay. So he turns around and starts to go out and I said, hang on a second, Vern. And I let it for all it was worth. What are you apologising for? Blah, 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 blah. Fine. Don't do it again. Left the classroom, Bart came straight back in and said, forgot. Me mum told me I got to have a note saying I apologised. Mum didn't trust him, obviously. So I said, okay, come at the end of lunchtime and I'll give you a note. End of lunchtime comes and goes, no Vern. End of period 8, just before the school day finishes, he barges in again and says, where's me note? And I said, oh, Vern, I said the end of lunchtime, you'll have to wait till the end of lunchtime tomorrow. And he stopped and he looked at me and said, me mum's going to kill me.
Really?
And I said, you won't ever pull a knife on me again, will you? And he said, no, miss.
Wow. Wow. Do you know if he ended up in jail or not?
No, I don't know. But, despite that horrible incident, I have such a feeling of warmth and affection for that young man. I really liked him.
Yeah.
I hope that somebody else, I gave time helping him and stuff like that, and I hope others did, because he had a lot of potential there.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that, sometimes the troubled ones are always the best ones, that you can bring out the warmth when you develop that rapport and that trust with them. It's really interesting to see how they change, because when I was teaching, I had a few interesting students and they were big boys and they'd ask me questions when I'd say, you're not allowed to have your phone or take your hoodie off or whatever. And they'd say, why, miss? And then they'd sort of talk about how they gave a hard time to their teachers. I said, you've got to learn respect. And so that was a really interesting thing for me. So I can relate to what you're saying there, because sometimes the kids have such a hard time. The only way that they can respond or behave is in a way to either get attention or to distract.
Exactly. That knife at me it didn't start off, that was a fisticuff and a knife between the two boys. So it wasn't set up as an aggressive act to me.
No.
I didn't see that at that particular moment, of course. But, in hindsight. But when I became obviously pregnant, he was the first student who came, oh, miss, how are you? When's the baby due? Can I clean the blackboard for you? Can I get a chair for you? You don't call the baby after me, Miss Novan. But what you were saying about respect, I think you need to model it too. And
yes.
I'm a little bit sad that some of the old-fashioned ways have gone. When we went to school, and when certainly in the early days of my teaching, when a teacher walked into a room, the students would stand. And I insisted on that in Townsville. And one day the kids said, "Why do you make us stand?" And I said, "When I come in the classroom, do I sit down and just start doing whatever I'm doing, or do I stand to greet you?" And they said, "You stand to greet us." And I said, "I'm not asking you to do anything I'm not doing."
Yes. It's interesting, isn't it? So all those things that you've actually done, you carry on into your life now with all the amazing work that you do. Now, you just talk about the work that you actually do now, Kathy, because it is, I don't know, it's amazing work. And there's not a lot of, what can I say, there's not a lot of return in financially for what you do, but what you do is you give the opportunity to those less fortunate to have something that they've not had before, or they lost, or you give them a respect or a kindness that others haven't shown them in a long time.
And it's not just to them, but to the volunteers too. Yeah, so the word work has to be in inverted commas because I don't get paid for this.
Yes.
I founded a charity called Impact, and what we do is make a difference to Victorian women and children who are fleeing extreme violence at home. Now, we do that through the safe houses rather than one-on-one, A, because I'm not trained in that area, but B, because that makes everything transparent, ethical and accountable. And that's one of my key principles is the T principle, TEA, transparent, ethical and accountable. So that's very, very important. Impact, it is a charity, but we don't give charity. What we do is we give gifts and services with dignity, and we give dignity with gifts and services. And so we don't give anything that's pre-loved. Now, a lot of people get cross with me about that. "Oh, you're a charity. Why won't you take my second-hand this or my second-hand that? And of course I've looked after it beautifully and blah, blah, blah." And I've no doubt most people are wanting to give me things that are well cared for. I've learned from experience that some people's definition of well cared for and mine are not the same, like unwashed underpants.
Oh, really?
Yes. So we don't give pre-loved goods. We only give new.
And isn't it beautiful because you find that people that understand that are so willing to give and help.
Exactly. And so even on our big packing days, it didn't happen this COVID. We managed to do something, but we didn't do it in our normal way. At our packing days, we have about 500 volunteers helping. And everybody's really amazing and they're keen and they're wrapping, but some people are wrapping very haphazardly. And you only need to go to somebody and say, "If you received this as a gift, would that make you feel good?" And they'll look at me and say, "I'll try again." No, thank good. So it's putting the love in it, which is why we call the bags that we put everything in bags of love.
Yeah.
Because it's not just stuff we're putting in there, we're putting love in there.
So how many years have you been doing this?
Okay, it started as an accident. In 2006 was our first Mother's Day. So what happened then was I was working very full time. I still had 3 children at home. I've been a single mother with them since they were 5, 3 and 8 weeks old.
Wow.
And
That's a responsibility.
Yeah, so that's where I get my strength from my mother and she from her mother. We do what we need to do. If I go back to the Holocaust story, part of it, my family spent 9 months in hiding in a roof space that was only 40 centimetres tall at its highest peak.
Wow.
And my grandfather became very religious. He slept and prayed, and my grandmother she plotted and planned.
Good on her.
Yeah, that's so when you ask me who do I, you can see why. So I was working, I had my children at home, and I was the president of a large communal organisation, and my term as president came to an end. And everyone knows it only takes you 5 minutes a week to run an organisation, so I had 5 minutes spare up my sleeve a week.
5 minutes a week? Really? Okay.
It was
more about that.
It was coming up to Mother's Day, and all I could see were TV advertisements, magazine advertisements, billboards, happy mummies getting electrical appliances and chocolates that we neither need nor want.
Yeah.
And I thought, golly, I'm sure there are others who won't even get that. But more so, all of this positive advertising is actually having a negative effect, because it's reminding us of what's been drummed into us, that we are worthless, we are unlovable, nobody needs us, nobody wants us, we're a waste of space on this earth. So I thought, wouldn't it be nice if we could give them a token gift at Mother's Day, that just for half a minute they think someone they don't even know thinks they're worthwhile.
Cares.
Yeah. So I did some research. It was really bad research, as it turns out. And I thought that there were 100 Victorian women and their children in hiding on any given night because of domestic violence.
Only 100?
And I thought 100 was a disgraceful number. And it is a disgraceful number. So 12 friends and I got together. We got a few donations. We bought a couple of things out of our own money. We packed 100 little gift boxes. I got them off to the couple of refuges I knew about. Chip chop, job done, finished. And then the thank you note started.
Really?
And the one that still upsets me the most was the one that told me that this was her first ever Mother's Day gift that did not include a black eye.
Oh.
And so Impact was born. So it's totally volunteer run and driven. It's just grew like topsy. Last Christmas, so from our 12 friends and 100 little boxes, we had 500 people packing nearly 2,000 bags of love, plus children's toys to help Father Christmas, plus what we call house bags. They're the big, huge Chinese stripy bags.
Right.
That are full of all the stuff that we won't put in our individual bags. So, for example, because we don't know which bag of love is going to which particular woman, no point giving a postmenopausal woman tampons.
Yes.
So all feminine hygiene products go into the house bags for the caseworkers to distribute on an as-needs basis.
Right, okay.
Children, we don't put children's things in the bags of love because we don't know which woman's getting which bag. Has she got children? What age are they? Are they with her or have they been taken away? So they're separate also for the house caseworkers to give on an as-needs basis.
Right.
We've moved into giving interest-free loans. We've fundraised to repair and refurbish refuges. And last year we did started two amazing programs. One we had a small grant for, and we trialled a wellness program. We called it Impactful. So it was run at a women's only gym. Participation required you to be referred either by a safe house or a doctor or a police person or a self-help group or something like that. We had a social worker who was managing that program and participating in it, and we had 3 police women who were participating in it. It was free. It was with free childcare. We had some gifts. They all got a free lunch. And at the end, we gave them each a little free massage as well. I know. We surveyed every participant before every session and surveyed her after every session on 5 criteria, and I can't remember all 5. One was level of stress, level of, of those sorts of things. How do you feel right now, and how do you feel an hour and a half later?
Emotions and
exactly.
And the fear and all that sort of thing.
Exactly.
That they would be experiencing.
Correct. And they always were a positive result. So no matter how stressed they were when they walked in, they were less stressed when they came out. If they didn't feel connected before, they felt connected after. And that was wonderful.
Isn't that important? Because that connection, because they are isolated, they don't have friends, they're not allowed to see their friends or their families. So this connection that you created for them with others who are going through the same thing
Yes.
There's a connectedness there and a support that we will never understand.
Correct. What we also did was we didn't say it was only people going through it now. It could be somebody who'd been through it in the past, because certain things never leave you.
Oh.
So it was, as you know, so it was, really, if you are in a traumatic family situation or have been, and it was important to have the police women there too, because even though these women had been victims and the police were on their side, doesn't mean that their interaction with police had always been positive.
Mm.
And so we were clear that we were not a therapy group, but it was a way of getting out. Now, one of the women, she was lovely, she spoke at one of our events, and she started by saying, "I hate yoga," is what we did. we were offering, we didn't call it an exercise class, we called it a wellness group. So there was a little bit of gentle yoga, some meditation, some stretching, those sorts of things. I hate yoga. But I love this so much that when she moved to 40 kilometres away, she still came.
Really?
Yes, that's how much that program meant to her. I still hate yoga, but I love this so much. Mm. So incredibly proud of that. It's so duplicatable around. Sorry?
Is it still going?
Well, no, it's not, because of COVID. That particular gym has had to close.
Yes.
We had to have a women's only gym that had a separate childcare room so that we could care for the children as well. And so the grant covered all of that. And we worked it out with the gym. We picked a session where they're generally not very busy. And if other people came in, they could see there's a class operating. If they said, "Oh, can I join in?" the line was, "I'm sorry, that's full today."
Yeah.
So it was still maintaining confidentiality and privacy, which was important. We're looking for more funding, and we'd like to reintroduce and continue that around. But see, not every Fernwood gym, for example, has a separate childcare room, and that's important. We need to be able to include that. Where we chose was close to a station, so people could get to it by public transport easily. So it's all sorts of variants that we thought about.